Josh Heupel or Lane Kiffin, you're the athletic director. You have to hire a coach. Those are the two candidates that are on the board. Who are you choosing, Heupel or Kiffin?
All right, I'm going to set up where they each have advantages, and it's going to be the opposite of what I said yesterday between the two. And here's what I mean by that. I think in terms of an X's and O's offensive mind, Dave, surprisingly, I lean more Lane Kiffin than Josh Heupel. I think Lane Kiffin actually is a better – if I need someone to draw up a game plan and be a play caller on the sidelines from an X's and O's perspective on offense, which is both of their fortes, I think Lane Kiffin has the edge on Josh Heupel. I think he's got a lot more versatility in different offenses. I think he can adapt a lot better. So I'm giving him the edge.
Now, wait, what? Why do you say that might surprise some people? Because I think they're both two of the better offensive coaches in the nation, but I would easily take Kiffin over Heupel.
As an X's and okay.
Just in terms of offense.
I mean, if you say easily, then yeah. I mean, okay. I think a lot of people would rather take. I think, particularly among Vol Nation, would think Heupel just because of that 2022 season. But I can get with you if you would easily take Kiffin. I get that. I just understand where people would want to lean Heupel because of the insane video game numbers the offense was putting up under Heupel. Kiffin doesn't run those type of offenses usually. I guess where I'm landing is that here's the thing, though. There's a big elephant in the room with Heupel versus Kiffin, which is who's going to establish a better culture that's necessary for winning a title. And I don't even think it's close. I think it's Josh Heupel.
I agree with that. I think he's going to have a team that's going to continue to play hard when some of their goals are off the table later in the season. Now, the one thing that I would have said before NIL and all of that changed is that eventually Lane Kiffin's going to get you in trouble, right? I'm not sure that's the case any longer with all the rule changes. And let's discuss what they've done in the transfer portal. Today's tough question, make it a poll question. Who do you hire, Josh Heupel or Lane Kiffin? And we realize that our fans are slightly slanted towards Tennessee, and Heupel's probably going to win that thing. But I'm curious how many people think it might just be Lane Kiffin. And this is a more mature Lane Kiffin. Let's not talk about 2009 Lane Kiffin. Today's tough question brought to you by Banks & Jones, Tennessee's trial attorney, banksandjones.com.
Why Banks & Jones? Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks & Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks & Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks & Jones. T. Scott Jones. banksandjones.com.
Okay. I would definitely take Josh Heupel over 2009 Lane Kiffin, who had a little bit too much ego, thought going back to Southern California he could resurrect things despite the pending scholarship restrictions and all that the Trojans had to deal with. I also would take Josh Heupel over 2009 Lane Kiffin because those guys were a little bit wild. There were a lot of
understatement of the century.
Yeah, there were a lot of bottles of bourbon consumed on Sunday night when the game plan was being created for the upcoming season, to the point in which David Blackburn had to be moved from an administrative role to the director of football operations, which basically meant just keep an eye on these goofballs and make sure they don't do anything crazy. I don't think he was real happy about that move, and I don't blame him. And I know that he was quickly resented by the coaches. But when you start having to do stuff like that and you have to start policing what a 40-year-old man, that's pretty sad. Now, so I would definitely take Josh Heupel over 2009 Lane Kiffin. I'm going to take it a step further. I think they're a wash in the transfer portal. I think they both had success there. Lane Kiffin probably has to be a little bit more dependent, so a little bit more success. But I think Josh Heupel's gone out and got what he needed in the transfer portal. As far as recruiting, I think that they're basically a wash. Now, if you add Ed Orgeron to that staff, like Lane had at Tennessee, maybe I'm thinking a little bit different. But I'll take Rodney Garner as Tennessee's best assistant coach recruiter over any assistant coach that might be in Oxford, Mississippi. So I'm not only taking Josh over 2009 Kiffin, I'm also taking him over 2025 Kiffin. And here's why. You mentioned the culture. I think that is key. Now, I could be proven wrong. Lane Kiffin might be a head coach in college football, and that's exactly what players want. They just want to be coached like professionals. But I still think you're going to have young men that need to be brought up, that need to be motivated, that need to be coaxed through hard times. And I think Josh Heupel is great at that. And again, the culture is absolutely tremendous of what he's been able to build. So I would go with Josh Heupel. It's close. And I've got an awful lot of respect for Lane Kiffin, who I know on a personal level, I think he's matured. I think his dad passing away probably was a factor in that last year as well. But just as a whole, I think he's matured. Now, let me get you to address this. The Twitter, the social media stuff that Lane Kiffin takes part in, is that a sign of brashness? Is that a sign of cockiness? Or is that just good old fun if you're an athletic director? I would tell you as an athletic director, I would just as soon do without it.
I would too. For Lane Kiffin specifically, I think Lane Kiffin is somebody who, I mean, we're going to talk about Steve Spurrier later in the show, but this is where I actually think they're similar. I put Bruce Pearl in this category. There are some coaches who, they're like players, they kind of feed off the messiness and drama, and it makes them a little bit better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We'll go to whether or not you agree or disagree with Donald Trump's policies, I'm not going to get into that. But like when people are like, he needs to get off Twitter, I'm like, honestly, some people feed off like the Twitter fights. Some people do better. I can tell you this as a writer, as a reporter, as someone who takes hot takes on things. I feed off Twitter wars. I feed off Twitter feuds. It makes me better. I have so much. If I got Tom one day, I have no problem getting into Twitter wars with people and fighting them. And so I think Lane Kiffin is of that mindset that I think he feeds off it and it makes him better.
Caleb just basically asked for more work.
I'm not going to start Twitter wars for no reason.
I know. If Caleb's got time for Twitter wars, there's going to be more on his work plate later this afternoon. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, but there's that. I don't necessarily think that directly reflects always culture, but I'll say this with Lane Kiffin specifically. Lane Kiffin is going to get mercenaries a lot of times. Let's take this route. Part of building culture is having, and I hate to be this way, but if you recruit kids from right backgrounds with right support systems, you're likelier to have a better culture, right?
Which Lane did not do in 2009 and would have set him back at least a year because there were more felons than All-Americans on that team.
Exactly. Let me ask you, you're the parent, let's talk about these kids' backgrounds. Many come from lower middle class to poor backgrounds. Their kid is the first in their family to try to get a chance at college, and say you're in that situation. You're a good parent, Dave. You're a very good parent, and your kid's in that situation. Lane Kiffin and Ed Orgeron come to recruit your kid. Josh Heupel and Rodney Garner come to recruit your kid. Where do you want them going for the next 4 years in terms of developing them as people?
Okay, well, as a parent, I would want Heupel and Garner, but let me. That's me.
But the mom makes decisions for the kids half the time, don't they?
Well, that's true, but that's me. But let's add this in there for a second. Do you think Nick Iamaleava was that he would have been okay with Kiffin's brashness if they had recruited Nico? I mean, I think there are some parents that do like that spotlight. And in the case where it's the kid's decision, and I have been around, I would say, this is just me throwing this out there. I would say 25% of the time it's purely the kid's decision, 25% the mom, maybe 40% the dad, and the remainder is like a high school coach or a hanger-on or some guy like that. So I do think they make their own decision. I think the kids could get swept up in that, don't you? That bravado.
Well, yes, they could, but that's why I said, let's do the hypothetical. We're talking the good parents, the ones that don't want to be the superstar, that don't want, the ones that aren't Nick Iamaleava, who I think we can both agree is not a good parent. Okay, so
Seems a little strong, but anyway.
He cost his kids some money because he was searching for a bigger NIL deal for himself. How does that make you a good parent? Anyways.
Okay.
So
I have been told, and I haven't reported this yet, that the agent was the driving force behind that, and maybe Nick got a little too far thrown under the bus. But anyway, more of that will come out as time.
Yes, but they didn't have to jump and transfer and all of that. So the reason I'm saying all of this is to bring up that, like,
and you got to tell your kid to go to practice on that Friday morning.
Exactly.
I'll give you that. I don't care what the agent's doing behind the scenes. He's got to go to practice Friday morning, and he's got to be at the orange and white game, even if he's going to transfer on Sunday. Sorry, that's just man.
And also, most parents of recruits they want their kid in the right environment. Bobby Bowden said this one time, and it's one of the smartest things I'd heard a coach say, because Bobby Bowden, as you know, had the Fulmer thing going. What was Bobby Bowden's biggest advantage? He and Fulmer both were two of the rare coaches in the 80s and 90s willing to go to certain areas that many coaches were just scared to go to, right, to recruit kids. Yes. And Bobby Bowden had this quote where he said, even if the kids come from a really bad background, even if their parents are bad people, most of the time, parents who are bad people, they don't want their kids being bad people. And they may be the most, like, crime-ridden, like, wrapped up in the worst type of lives possible, but they'll do everything to get their kid out of that life. And so,
are you implying in some shape, form, or fashion that Ed Orgeron showed up to Marlon Wallace's home drunk on a recruiting visit? Is that what you're trying to say?
I mean, I'm saying that if you see, forget Lane Kiffin versus Josh Heupel, we're already there. Yeah, Ed Orgeron versus Rodney Garner. Who do you think is going to connect better with the parents in these communities and make the parents, who do you think the parents are going to feel safer putting their kids in the hands of?
Just for those that don't know, I've got my dad has a dog named Daisy that could have secured Marlon Wall's signature to Tennessee, as long as Daisy didn't show up drunk. That was the biggest issue. So that's one of the things that you have to factor in, that you think that Lane Kiffin has gotten behind. He said he's calmed down a little bit. I know the SEC has been concerned with the look because they asked me about it, that he was dating like a 25-year-old a couple of years ago. That doesn't bother me at all. I mean, heck, there's a hot 25-year-old that wants to date me. Just, here's my number, 86522. But, I mean, go ahead and give me a call. That's fine. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with that at all. Here's the one thing that we haven't mentioned that I have a problem with. Ultimately, Lane Kiffin quit twice. He quit on the Oakland Raiders by making brash statements and getting himself fired. I mean, he wanted to get fired. It was pretty obvious. It's like if Caleb came on here and said, Dave, you're no good fat son of a, I can't believe your stupid opinions. Well, I mean, you're just begging to get fired. That's what he was doing at Oakland. And he quit on Tennessee. And I'm sorry. I know coaches leave, and I know it's a free market society, but you quit on a commitment. And I know it's money, and I know it's business, but your commitment was to resurrect a proud program. And he quit. And he left. And I don't care if it's his dream job or not. And I would tell Lane this right now. You don't leave a program after a year. I don't care that the language was that bad where it was just an $800,000 buyout. That was stupid by the university's part. Ultimately, he's a quitter. So my concern would be you hire him at my school, Hooker U. You hire him at Hooker U, and he's my top paid pimp. And he, let's say, makes it to the national championship game. And he's the type of guy that Jerry Jones would love, right?
Right.
Okay. So Jerry Jones would go hire him, and Lane Kiffin, instead of finishing the job and winning the national championship, would bolt. Or maybe even go to another school that offered more money. That would be my one concern. I know that people think he's changed and matured, but listen, he's going to quit Ole Miss one day. He's going to win another 10 games. And he's going to have a better offer than Ole Miss, and he's going to quit Ole Miss. He is at heart a quitter. Now, one of the things on the message board that I wanted to bring up is that somebody mentioned he's always had good quarterback play. That is a surprising advantage that Lane Kiffin has over Josh Heupel that I didn't think would have been the case earlier this century.
Except for the first half of the 2008 season or the 2009 season with Jonathan Crompton. He's always had good quarterback play. Not Jonathan Crompton's fault, really. Not really Lane Kiffin's fault. He had the wrong guy coaching him, as we found out. But
well, the kid was shattered because the previous coaching staff threw him under the bus.
Right.
I mean, I know that family really well, and I don't mind sharing some of that. The kid's confidence was shattered.
Yeah. No, I believe that. I believe that. So, no, you're right. That is kind of intriguing. I never thought about that, but I'm trying to think of when Lane's never really had bad quarterback play outside of that. His offenses have always been good. We're not being hard enough on Lane Kiffin quitting on Tennessee, though, Dave, because Dave,
it was just pretty hard.
No, because he didn't just quit on Tennessee. He quit on Tennessee after he lit the place on fire. So let's not forget what he does to Tennessee, Dave. He comes to Tennessee. He kicks off a significant portion of players from the team that were former recruits because he wanted to make room for his recruits. Remember that?
Right.
He pulls scholarships from other commitments. Taj Boyd refuses to go after Cam Newton, Bryce Petty, to get room for his guys.
Okay, unpopular opinion. I didn't have a problem with the Taj Boyd thing because I didn't think it fit his style. So I don't want to do hindsight 2020.
Okay, but he does that to make room for his. He does all of that to make room for his recruits, half of whom are felons, and the other half of whom really didn't care to play, like Tyler Bray. So he significantly depletes the roster, and then he bolts. So he bolts after he made the let's be honest, Dave. Kiffin took over for Fulmer. Derek Dooley took over for Kiffin. You can feel however you want. You can feel however you want about Derek Dooley. Who inherited a worse roster? Kiffin from Fulmer or Dooley from Kiffin?
Dooley.
It's not close.
Dooley.
Yeah.
I mean, there was one class that pretty much didn't count because they were getting arrested at the pilot.
Yeah, exactly. So Dooley inherited, and by the way, Kiffin kicked off half the team or pulled half the scholarships to make room for those recruits that were all getting arrested at the pilot. I mean, and then he leaves. The best analogy, let's just say what it is. I don't like using these types of jokes, but it's like, it's the only analogy I can think of. Kiffin with Tennessee, he's a guy that farts in a crowded elevator and then walks off the elevator. I mean, that's what he did, isn't it? So, like,
are you allowed to do that in a sauna? I'm asking for a friend.
I don't know.
No, it's worse than a sauna.
Okay, yeah, fine. He does it in a sauna and he walks out of the sauna. Yes, that was what Lane Kiffin did at Tennessee.
Steamy. It's no good.
So I think it's even worse when you think about it that way. It's not like he built Tennessee up, brought a bunch of talent in and left. No, he wrecked the roster and then he left.
Yeah. Now, we want to be real clear. Josh Heupel's not going anywhere that we know of. And we're talking about not necessarily at Tennessee, but if you're just an athletic director at your particular school and you have to choose between these two. So let's go to the poll question. What are people saying? And give me some good reasons online, and I will get to that. Now, Derek brings up a very good point. With a kicker having a bad quad, God help us, Mount Cody, shaking my head. If they beat Alabama that year, this conversation off one game is probably different. And Lane Kiffin, though, blew that because he had about 18 seconds left and the ball was it would have been, I think it was a 42-yard field goal. He had time and a timeout, took a timeout to the locker room back to Knoxville where he could have gotten closer. But that's a whole different argument.
I still maintain he didn't do that because he didn't want to get blamed if there was a call that he made that didn't work out. And I'm holding to that. But I don't think the conversation changes because he's still going to USC at the end of the year.
I just think that was his first big pressure situation as a coach.
Okay, but whether or not he wins or loses that game, that doesn't change the state of the program for Tennessee after he leaves. I think the LSU game a year later with Derek Dooley had a much bigger impact on the coach than the Alabama game did. What if Derek Dooley beats LSU in 2010?
Well, I'm just saying if we're having the conversation now and we're looking back at him beating Alabama in 2009, I think most of the people, if they were honest with themselves, would say they would take Kiffin over Heupel. But because that game went the way it did, I don't want to place too much on one game. Because that game went the way it did, Caleb, it's very debatable. And I would take Heupel. I would.
Yeah.
And some people have said this on the message board. Lane Kiffin would be in the top 3 of coaches that they would go after if Josh Heupel left. He certainly should be. I won't argue with that.
I mean, I would probably. I'm saying all this. We're nitpicking, comparing culture. I'm just saying Josh Heupel built such a great culture. But yes, I would go after Lane Kiffin if Josh Heupel left.
Okay, but no, that's not the question. Kiffin or Heupel? You got to hire one.
Heupel. Culture. Kiffin. I keep coming down. Kiffin. I think the personality of Kiffin that led to him getting a recruiting class with more felons than all SEC players. I think that personality is still there. He doesn't care about chemistry and culture. He gets mercenaries, and it's almost he runs a college football program almost the way Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys.
I still think there's a chance he ends up with the Cowboys for some reason. I don't know why.
Well,
I don't think that would work well at all.